It's October and autumn has arrived with a vengeance. The weather outside is currently horrible. But did you know there are still lots of seeds that you can be sowing this month? So this is what we'll be sowing at the trial garden, and hopefully it'll give you some inspiration of what to sow in your own garden. October is the perfect time to get in some overwintered broad beans and peas. Now for the broad beans, you can sow them outside, but only as long as you don't have a problem with anything like mice or pigeons that's gonna dig them up before they have a chance to germinate. I do, so what I tend to do is sow them in module trays first, in an unheated greenhouse or polytunnel. I go for the larger module trays so they've got room to spread out the roots, and that means that I have the choice as to whether I want to plant them out in winter or let them overwinter in the module trays and plant them out in early spring. Now broad beans are surprisingly frost tolerant, so even if they do get a bit frostbitten, you'll see that the ends of the leaves and the stalks can turn a bit black, but it won't kill the plant except in the very, very hardest winters, which we don't tend to get in the UK. So you're usually safe to plant these out. If you are in a more northerly part of the UK where you do get those harder winters, it's best to put a bit of fleece over them and then they should be fine getting through winter. For the peas, again, you can sow them in place. I know that if I sow my peas in place, I'm never going to get one. The mice will have the lot. So I, again, sow them in an unheated greenhouse first and then plant them out when they've got a bit bigger and have a fighting chance. What I do is sow them into drain pipes. You just get old drain pipes. You can measure the drain pipe to be the correct length for the area that you want to put the peas. And then you sow them into peat-free compost all the way down in kind of a zigzag pattern. And you can sow them really quite close together. Don't worry too much about the spacing, because remember, these are vines, and as they grow up, they're going to tangle all around each other anyway. So you can pack them quite tightly into that drain pipe. And then once they're big enough, you can then slide them all the way down the drain pipe and into the position that you want them. Now, the benefit of doing this is that if you sow them in a module tray, they'll tend to start twining around each other already, and you have an interesting kind of untangling job before you can plant them out. If you do it in a drain pipe, you don't have to worry about. You just push them down the drain pipe, slide them into position, and you're ready to roll. Now, the benefit of overwintering broad beans and peas is that it gives you a bit of an early start on them next season. So what they'll do is they will go dormant over winter, which means they'll just stop growing. They won't die back or anything, they just stop growing, and that's because of the daylight hours. There's not enough hours of sunlight in the day to keep them actively growing. But what will happen is that as soon as spring comes and the days start to lengthen, about the time that you would be sowing them, usually in spring, your already slightly more mature plants will take off. So it can give you up to a month's earlier harvest by overwintering them. Now you can be getting more Asian greens in this month, things like our komatsuna or pak choi. Now realistically, you're not going to get full heads of these. It's a bit late in the season, and October's the month where the days really start to shorten, and therefore it's going to be tougher to get those full heads to develop. But what you can do is treat them like a cut and cun crop. So just sprinkle the seed thinly where you want them to grow, and then let them come up as a clump. You can even mix different types together, and then you just continue to consistently pick the larger leaves, and it will keep giving you a good crop of Asian greens into winter. Now the same goes for salad leaves. You can be getting more in October, but again, realistically, you're probably not going to get lettuces to grow to their full heads at this time of year. But again, you can treat them as a cut and cun crop. So I like to get different types of lettuces, mix the seed together, and then sprinkle it where I want them to grow. And then I'll just treat them as a cut and cun crop all the way through winter. Now, particularly in the southern half of the country, you still have time to get some overwintering cauliflowers in. Now, these are going to have to go into module trays, and I like to plant these into larger module trays so they have more root room. They'll just sit and wait out the winter, and then when spring comes, they'll really take off much faster than if you were starting from seed at that point. Now, the benefit of putting them in a larger module tray means that you can overwinter them and they have some growing room in that tray before you plant them in their final position. Now, remember, these aren't going to be giving you cauliflowers until next year, but it's an investment in the future. You can be putting some basil in to grow in your windowsill over winter. Now, all you have to do is sprinkle the seed onto the surface of moist compost and put that pot onto a sunny windowsill, one that gets the maximum amount of light. And a south-facing windowsill is always going to be best for that, because in these months where you get minimal sunlight hours, you want to get the maximum amount that you can get. But it should just be enough to let the basil slowly grow. It won't take off in the way it would do with a spring crop, but it will grow because it can make the most of the heat in your home, and it will mean that you can be harvesting homegrown basil off your windowsill in winter. And finally, because we honestly believe that everyone can grow some food, whether you have an outside space or not, and because we think you can be growing food all year round, we've just launched a range of microgreens, which we're really excited about. And they couldn't be easier to grow. It's like instant gratification gardening, because you're going to have something to harvest within 1 to 2 weeks, which is brilliant. You don't even have to wait for it. And winter's a great time to start getting into a routine of sowing regular microgreens, because they're really nutrient packed. And if you sow them regularly, you can constantly be harvesting fresh food, and you don't even need an outside space to do it. So lots of seeds that you can be sowing even though autumn has hit hard. And hopefully that's given you some inspiration of what you can be growing this month in your own home.